We're gathered here this morning to capture the early history and the current history of the UCDA, the University of California Davis Emeriti Association Video Records Project. We have with us some people that I'll introduce in a moment who have been early participants and some who are currently running the show. My name is Alec McCall. I'm currently the co-chairman of the Video Records Committee. I'm here with my colleague Bill Breidenbach, who's my co-chair, sitting at the other end. And then we have, in no particular order, Bob Layton. As soon as you hear him, you'll know he was the voice of this organization for many, many years. Next, John Goss, longtime chairman of the Video Records Committee, and the dean of the crowd, Vern Mendel, who was the cameraman since 1994 to 2010. And finally, Michael Reed, who was an early participant in the technology side in the Department of Environmental Horticulture. So what we want to do this morning is try and capture what went on. I'm going to suggest that we keep in mind as we go through this, there are several themes we want to follow on through. Who were the players and what did they do? And then the second theme is, where did they do it? Where was this happening? Because the location of this has gone to several locations over time. Third, it's been a technology-driven project, and that technology has changed constantly over time, from borrowed cameras to a 3-camera studio. And finally, who were the managers and who were the leaders over time, and how did this project proceed? I'm going to suggest also that we break it into 3 periods, because I think there's different things happening in each period. The first would be the early years, 1991 through 1998. And this is the period in time in which Alan Stambusky was the chair and was very active. And then the second period, 98 to 2008 or 2010, is when the project moved into Marac Hall and grew rapidly. And then the third period, 2008 to the current level, is when the project has done other things besides just do video records. So if that's an agreeable process, I think I'll turn it over to Bill and let Bill start the questioning.
Well, Bill, Bill will start by asking Alex just to review a little bit of the history. Who did start this project and how did it start?
As best I can tell from reviewing the archives of the Emeriti Association, it originated with a motion passed in October 1991 to establish a historical and video records ad hoc committee. The person who was behind that was Alan Stambusky, and he had enlisted in his support Everard de Harncourt, who was going to be his co-partner. De Harncourt had been a videographer for Jacques Cousteau, so was going to be on the technology side. And the committee was set up, and in 1992-3, the committee consisted of 4 people: Alan Stambusky, Harry Cole, Everard de Harncourt, and Jerry Rosen. In 93-94, Dick Blanchard and Jim Scheidler were added. Though it's clear in 1993 that Jim DeVay was already involved in the project as a scheduler. He was the one, after the committee had decided who should be interviewed, Jim DeVay was a bulldog and went out and got people to come in and get interviewed. So that's the early history.
Okay. And who were the early, when were the first interviews done, and who?
Well, the first interview was done in 1993. You should be answering that question, but I think it was Ledyard Stebbins was the first one. I think I also should point out that somewhere between 93 and 96, there was a second part. Remember, the original title was History and Video Records. And so in 1996, it was split into 2 committees. The Video Records Committee continued, and the History Committee became a campus committee when the campus joined in the commissioning of the history of the Davis campus, called Abundant Harvest, written by Anne Schuring, which was published by 1999. So that's when the history side went on a campus basis. The Video Records has always been a committee of the Emeriti Association.
Well, now an early participant was Harry Cole, correct?
Right.
And he was chair of environmental horticulture, as I believe.
Right.
And so he was the videographer for most of the interviews up till Mike. You know when that all was going on?
Well, I guess until he passed away, because it was in the early 90s, as I recall. I actually looked at some footage of Harry testing microphones and so on, and it was labeled 94, June of 94. So that was sort of the time when he was getting set up in the mock library that we had set up in the back trailer of Environmental Hort.
So this was all going on then in environmental horticulture at that time. Early on, the interviews were mostly done in people's houses or Briggs Hall basement or people's backyards, and then when Harry took over, it started going into being done in the horticulture department in the library, correct?
Well, it wasn't really the library; it was a mock library. We sort of had a creative space in the back trailer, which used to be a poultry husbandry building, but they moved it back there for me to have a vase life room. And behind that, we had storage for cameras and equipment. And Harry used to have his bridge sessions there at lunchtime, I remember, with Barbara Nichols and others. And then we set up this little corner with books from the library. We'd stopped having a library several years before that, but there was still a lot of books. So they were put in the bookshelves, and that served as the backdrop for the videography.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Bill, there was, as I read the record, there were 10 interviews done in 1993. All of which were done away from environmental horticulture in a variety of places, some of which I'm not exactly sure what they are, but there's some look like they're in the basement of Briggs Hall, several look like they're in homes, and so on. So you're saying you started in the library, Mike, in 95? That's your thinking?
I think it was 94, but
94, okay.
At least that's the date stamp on the video that I have, which I think is probably correct.
Now, at various points on these recordings, you have people listed as the artistic director or the videographer or the editor or the producer. Now, who was doing what to whom in that period?
I really wasn't involved in the actual interviews. At that time I was Associate Dean for Extension in the college. And so I had a little project with the farm advisors and specialists trying to get people to use video as a means of teaching. Mm-hmm. And so I had a lot of equipment and a little bit of software, and Harry was very excited about that. So that's how I came to be involved, really.
So Harry was actually, he was running the camera.
Yes, he was.
Was the original, I mean, the first camera must have just been one camera that was taken around to varying homes.
I assume so, yes.
And that would have been Harry's camera?
I think it was probably one of the cameras that I had, at that time.
Okay. And what was Stambusky's role then? I mean, he was chairman of the committee, but what was his role?
I really don't remember.
He was artistic director.
Yeah.
But he must have been involved in inviting the people to do the interviews, I would think, from what his position was in those early days. And you were they were doing the editing at DCTV, is that correct?
Actually, that came a little later. I mean, initially, I think Harry was using, desktop editing software, but then he made the connection with DCTV, or somebody did, I remember. So it didn't start with DCTV.
But
do you remember having any contact in those early days with Jim DeVay?
Yes, I do, yeah. But I'm not sure exactly when. The timing is back there.
Early on.
Yeah.
Yeah. What year did you become first involved, Mike? 94, 93?
I would think 93. Yes.
93, okay, yeah. So Stambusky did the introductions. I mean, he was the on-camera person who gave the introductions.
Hello, I'm Alan Stambusky, Professor Emeritus of Dramatic Art and current chair of the Video and Historical Records Committee of the UCD Emeriti Association. As part of our ongoing series of interviews in 1993 with noted emeriti of the University of California at Davis, we present today a conversation with the distinguished plant geneticist G. Ledyard Stebbins.
De Harncourt's role, was he your cameraman? Bob, Vern, you must...
Well, this is all hearsay, but yes, he was the cameraman. He was the technical individual on the committee.
Okay.
Stambusky was from the Department of Dramatic Arts, and he saw himself as an artist. And when I came in and started working with the cameras, he insisted on operating the camera so that it had an artist touch, which always escaped me. But
now, one of the things that I heard as I listened about the history of this thing is there was something called a list.
Yes.
A list of names that was prepared by someone to be guidance to the committee as to who should be interviewed. Now, in my interview with Emeritus Chancellor Vanderhoof, who would have been Chancellor at the time, or Executive Vice Chancellor at the time this was all happening, is that list had been prepared in the Chancellor's office in the late 80s, probably the last act or one of the last acts of Lorena Herrig, who was the assistant to the Chancellor. And it contained all of the names of all the emeriti who had retired at that time. As I understand it, later on, there became a debate within the committee as to whether or not the video records should be only interviewing stars, well-known, or should all emeriti be eligible? And that debate went on for many, many years. Can anybody enlighten me about that debate? Was there such a list? Did such a debate go on?
there was such a list, and the debate went on, and then John took over.
My recollection is that Alan, at the time we pretty well exhausted the names on that list, he was ready to close the project down. He didn't think it was worthwhile to ever consider new emeriti. And when I took over, that was the first thing I said. Well, anyone in the association who had emeriti status was eligible for an interview.
Mm-hmm.
So
when I talked to Larry Vanderhoof, he said he remembers debates early on. On one side, Stambusky saying it should be selective, and on the other side, Paul Stump, who was an early president of the Emeriti Association, saying it should be open to all. And you ended that debate, John. Thank you very much.
And you took over at 98, is that right? Or you got on the committee at 98?
Pardon?
In 1998, you were on the...
I think I became chair in 98, but Dick Kramer asked me to help Vern about at least a couple years before that. So I had association with the Video Records Committee as a member, but not as a chair. So I think I started the chairmanship in 98.
Yep. Okay, and the technology, was it changing during this early period? And as I understand it, Mike, you got some new equipment, and that excited everybody. What was it?
Well, we went through all the various. We started with VHS, and then we went to, well, we're still VHS, but we had the wide format, and then we went to high 8, I guess, and eventually digital. But and certainly, I think at some point Harry or the committee got funds to buy their own equipment. In the mid-90s, I think.
In the mid-90s, okay.
You would remember that, Vern. You guys got cameras.
Early on, we were borrowing cameras from Michael and the Department of Environmental Horticulture. And some of us were concerned about that. So I probably did most of the agitating to get some equipment for the Emeriti Association. So we enlisted a very capable individual from Extension, Michael Poe. Michael Poe was very knowledgeable about not only the modern technology that was now available, but the early technology. So Mike became my primary advisor. And we bought the first equipment for the Emeriti, which was an Apple computer and Adobe software. Prior to that, we would shoot an interview in this fake library, and then Harry Cole before me, and then myself, we'd have to take the VCR tape, VHS tape, down to Davis Community Television, where they allowed us to borrow their equipment to edit it. Well, needless to say, that was highly inefficient and time-consuming. But Harry did that before me, and then I did it for a couple of years, as I recall. Let me step back just a little ways. I was president of the Emeriti Association at Davis, and Harry was doing this work for the Emeriti Association. And he came to me and asked if I could recruit some help, because he needed some, it was more than he wanted to do. So I put out an appeal 2 or 3 times to no avail. So I said to Harry, well, I like to work with technical things. I don't know anything about videotaping, but when I finish my responsibilities here, I'll come help you. Good, says he. I will start teaching you how to do this as soon as you're ready. So we had set up a date in September of 1996 for him to begin training me. Unfortunately, he died before the date arrived. And so then I had to go to Davis Community Television, where they were offering free courses on, let's see if I can remember, camera techniques, productions, and one other, I don't recall right now. Oh, editing. Editing. So at that stage, Davis Community Television was pretty darn primitive itself, and we were editing reel to reel. And when Emeriti Association got its new Apple computer and Adobe software, we can now do that ourselves. All of this for me was a steep learning curve. I'd never done anything like this in my life. So I spent a lot of time in this very facility getting help from people over here on how to do this. And between here and Davis Community Television, I eventually learned it. And that's enough for now.
Well, I think that I was going to come to that immediately, Vernon. Thank you for doing that, because you became engaged very much in 1994, 1996. 96. And that's about the time that Stambusky no longer identifies himself as chairman of the committee on the tapes. So who was the chair of the committee between 96 and 98 when John took on?
Soils.
Oh, Connie Delwich?
Connie Delwich.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
So he served for 2 years as chair.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I followed Connie.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, the Harncourt died in early 1996 as well.
I think he died in 1994.
No, his obituary shows that he died in, well, I shouldn't, but it doesn't matter. But anyway, no, he died the same year as Harry Cole. He died in February of the same year that Harry Cole died, which would have been.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's the same
That's
year.
96.
That's 96, yep.
Well, Alex, is a bit of technology. The VCR tapes went through about the first 80 interviews. And in 2004-05, we discovered they were getting old and were losing information. That's when you came on to help resurrect them. Enough said.
Yep, okay. All right.
The media was, those first 80 tapes were done on tape, and then you went to CD.
Yeah.
You went to CDs, and those were going to the library.
Right. All those went to the library. I interviewed and made notes on of the 80 tapes to help somebody review them.
That sort of came later, actually, than that. But so, Vern, you were recording on with when you finally got the equipment, and when did you move into Merak now?
When did we move into our own studio?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That had to have been early 2000. I think I don't remember 2001 or 2002. It was approximately when.
Actually, the first date recorded over there is in 2000. And
Was it 2000?
Late 2000, yeah. But before we get there, I just wanted to probe Vern a bit, because the program was going along well, 20 to 25 interviews a year. And then there was a big break between May of 1996 and November of 1996. That must have been your learning curve was going on. And as I understand it, Vern, your first interview was with the retired president of the University of California, Clark Kerr.
That's true.
And that's probably one of the most famous interviews we have.
That's probably
And
true.
how was it to cut your teeth on such an important personage?
I had a serious crutch. His name was Mike Poe. and I was really sweating this. So I'm chatting with Mike, and he says, "I'll come help you." So basically, he ran the camera, showing me how to do it. But a little humor on this. Clark Kerr had as much hair on his head as I do, or maybe even a little less. And we're in this fake library, environmental horticulture, and the door is a warm day.
Oh.
And the flies were abundant, and he's swatting flies off his head all throughout the interview, and I couldn't do a thing about it.
Well, for the record, Paul Stump was the interviewer.
That's right.
Yep.
That's correct.
All right, so maybe we can now move ahead a bit and come to the 98-2000 period. How did you get, and John, you can help on this, how did you get space in Merak Hall eventually after?
Halferty?
I was, thanks to Mike Reed, we were using space in environmental horticulture. Some of it was out close to the SP railroad tracks, and it struck me as a warehouse. I don't know what it was, but Mike had a lot of equipment out there. And anyway, we used that for a couple of years. And it was cold, it was drafty, And you never knew when an SP freight train was going to go rumbling by. So this has got to change. So I started working with Bob Halferty, who was, facilities? I don't know the proper title that he had.
He was Ed Spafford's
He
assistant.
replaced Ed Spafford.
Well, he was his assistant at that time,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
So I started working with Bob, and there was a major remodeling job going in the basement of the administration building, Brack Hall. And Bob came to me one day and he said, there's some space available in the basement that maybe you can use. It's got a couple of great big concrete pillars in it, and you maybe can't work around them, I don't know. So I went down and look with him to look. I think we can make this work. So that was the go-ahead. And so in a nutshell, that's how we got space in the basement of Marac Hall, which we're still using.
The same room.
Same
Same
room.
room.
Now, did you make some improvements on it?
Pardon?
Did you make some improvements on it? How was it sound, for example?
Well, I was able to work with the architects, so I made sure as I could that it was acoustically suitable, and so they put in soundboards in the walls and carpets on the floor and suitable ceilings. So it wasn't perfect, but it wasn't too bad. It was certainly better than working in Mike's warehouse.
Okay. Now, by this time, what is Alan Stambusky's role? Principally just to do the introductions?
He did two things. He loved to operate the camera. So I'd set the camera up for him, and he'd run the camera, and I kept trying. In those early days, our audios some of them were terrible, and I didn't know enough about it to know what to do with it. So I kept fiddling with the audio, but Stambusky was running the camera, and when we'd finish, he'd disappear, and I'd take the tape. Initially, I would take it to Davis Community Television, where I could edit it, and then we were given a room in the registrar's section of Marac Hall, where I could. This is after Emeriti got its own camera and software. So I could go to the basement of Marac Hall and edit the tape there. It did that for about 1.5 years, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got the studio that we now have.
Okay, okay. Now, were you still involved, Mike, at this point?
No.
And he was indirectly. He's a generous soul, this man.
With other people's money, I'm very good.
And he was loaning equipment to me from time to time. And in fact, at one point, he even gave me a piece of equipment. He had surplus.
I think the tripods you have may still be the ones that
I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Bill, in a minute I'm going to ask you to chime in on the sort of technology, but before I do that, I think we should pause and say that as I interpret it, Alan Stambusky was involved in the project until about 2003. And in a minute, I'd like Bob and John and Vern to tell us how Bob got involved as the voice of the project, because the project had two voices until this last year, actually. So, Vern, how did Bob Layton get involved in this thing as the voice?
Well, Stambusky was a diabetic, and he was starting to lose toes because of his diabetic condition. And so the handwriting was on the wall. We're going to lose Stambusky into this project soon. I was attending one of John Goss's meetings where we were selecting candidates, and I'm wondering who's going to be the voice. The dean of the vet school at the time was Bill Pritchard, and Bill and I liked one another, and so we were just kibitzing after the meeting, and I told him my dilemma. I have a candidate for you. I highly recommend Bob Layton. So I called him up, and he said, "Sure, I'll do that." And Bob had very, very short training period because Stambusky's health condition continued to deteriorate. And so Stambusky was essentially forced out of the system because of his health.
Okay. So Bob, now give us your, I know you can still remember the way you introduced the next 15 years of the project, right?
At first I was the second camera, and then when Stambusky left, I took over the introductions.
Yep.
And I continued to do that, and I presume that the poor fellow who had to read every one of these productions got the same voice saying the same thing. They must have gotten tired of it, but I did enjoy it thoroughly.
And what did you say?
Hello, I am Robert Layton, Professor Emeritus of Small Animal Surgery, the Veterinary School. In 1992, the Emeriti Association of the University of California, Davis, initiated a series of interviews with noted emeriti.
And then we would go on, I'd go off camera, and it was fascinating to watch the individuals we were interviewing. Mm-hmm. Absolutely fascinating.
I might add that after Bob took over, Stambusky came in one afternoon. His timing was perfect to listen to Bob deliver this. He didn't say anything, he just turned and walked out of the studio. So I phoned him later. "He's doing a good job," says he.
And that's quite a compliment from Alan.
So he got Stambusky's blessings.
Okay. Well, I think it's appropriate at this time to proud and really honor the three people, particularly, who made early contributions: Alan Stambusky, Everard de Harncourt, and Harry Cole. And I'd like to just quote briefly from each of their obituaries, because obviously they thought this was an important thing. From Stambusky, it said, "Interestingly, though, one of his greatest contributions to UC Davis campus came after his retirement in 1991. His leadership in a long-range effort to produce a video history of the campus through interviews with faculty administrators. Working with Vern Mennel and others, he and a small team of volunteers produced more than 250 hours of videotaped recordings, accounts of UCD events going back into the 1950s. And then on Harry Cole's introduction or obituary, it says, "One of Harry's greatest interests as a member of the Emeriti Association was in recording the lifetime contributions of retired Davis faculty. As a key member of a committee appointed by the association to create videotaped reviews of distinguished emeriti, Harry was both cameraman and editor. On his desk, the day after his sudden death, we found a note to an emeritus colleague that might have been considered our charge in composing this memorial. These are the instructions for the memorial," Harry wrote. "Try not to look on this as a painful experience, but as a chance to honor a friend. I'll be there to help where I can." And then finally from Everard Harnoncourt's obituary, During his retirement, Professor Hardencourt assisted the UC Davis Emeriti Association in the Video Records Emeriti Interview Project as director and camera operator. So I think those are three pioneers, all of whom have left us, along with Jim DeBay, that we should really say a great deal of thanks. Now, Bill, I'm going to go back and follow up with you on, let's pick up on the technology evolution as we move into Marac Hall and what happened after that.
Well, you've already gotten a background of where Vern was when he moved into the studio we now occupy in Marac. And at that time, he was using a mixer to mix between two cameras, and we were using Adobe, I think 1.5, one of the early Adobe editions of software to do the editing. And I was not involved until about 2004, 2005. I'd been on John's committee for a couple of years before that, but then I kept running into Vern on campus or on his way home from campus, and he'd stop me and talk to me about, wouldn't I like to get involved with the project? Thanks, Vern.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for saying yes.
I started out just watching Vern and helping a little bit with the editing and trying to learn the software because I had no experience at all with this technology either. So, and then in 2005, I started working with the project and got even included in the credits for some of the videos now as being an editor, although I still didn't really know how to edit at that point.
I'd like to acknowledge the fact that you made some important contributions in those early days to our audio system. I've mentioned already it was pretty bad, and you have really helped clean that up.
Yeah. Well, we went through, another edition of software, Adobe software, and then finally in about 2010, I think, was when we really started to change the technology. And in the interim, you had started on the Centennial Project, and we discovered, as John was mentioning earlier, that a lot of the media that we had for the early tapes and then even the CDs had deteriorated to the point where we were losing things. So there's two things that we did. We went into Adobe 4, which was a suite of software, and we started digitizing everything that had been done before because we discovered that it was not, usable in some cases for the Centennial Project, which Vern was very much involved with, or actually got the grant to do. So there was a transition there to newer software, and about 2011 we went to the current software that we're using now, which now had software which would allow us to do our mixing post-production. So we could video from 3 different cameras, put it into the software, and look at what scenes we wanted to show at each point, and do that all on the software in 2005. And we, as I said, we also digitized from there on in. Everything was in digital format, and we went back and recovered a lot of or most of the interviews into digital format over those years. That was a big project. You, Vern, and Alan Jackman, who joined us in about 2010, was also very much involved in recovering all those early videos.
Bill, I would appreciate if you would enumerate the steps from the original tapes, the video records, as to how they started with the videotapes to what they are now in the library.
Yeah, well, we took everything and digitized it, so we now have everything on hard drives stored, duplicate hard drives. So that's the way the media is preserved at this point. But now we produce everything on DVDs, and the DVDs go to the library, and to the participants, they get their own copy of the DVD. So that's the evolution of that. But that required us looking at, going in real time through every interview of the 269 to 300 that had been done previously, go through those, find out where there were problems, and do a transfer process from that media to the hard drive digital media.
Okay, I just wanted to press both John and Vern a bit. I'm looking at the numbers of interviews that have been held. And from a low of 5 in 1997, you went 24, 24 in 99 and 2000, and then you hit a huge number of 48 interviews in 2001. And then you were in the 20s all the way through to 2007, and then it went down 9, 7, 5, 8, 9, and 10. So this was a very productive period for you. Things must have been working well, were they?
Well, yes, they were working well, but Jim DeVay was having great success in convincing all of our colleagues to do an interview. And as that went on, it was more and more difficult in the later years to get people to agree to an interview.
Yeah, yeah. We'll come back to that point because that's a problem again now. So go ahead, Vern.
Well, an important point here is trying to convince our colleagues to sit still for an interview. And this might illustrate part of the problem. As Alex and I began to work on the Centennial Project, we realized that we only had one individual from the law school.
2. But that's
Was
okay.
it 3?
2.
2.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, how did we get Dick Weidig involved in this?
Well, we approached him because he had been acting dean around that time. And,
we got in touch with
and we shamed him into it.
Well, he shamed his colleagues.
Yeah.
Well, I worked on him before you guys worked on him, and his wife did.
Yeah,
And
Judy, yeah.
he just would not do an interview.
Dick never did do an interview, but what he did to his colleagues still amuses me. He wrote his colleagues a letter saying that he understood fully that as lawyers they were a reticent group. They didn't like to talk. And I'm giggling all the time that I'm reading this. And he shamed them. And all of a sudden we got 6 or 8 lawyers to volunteer to sit for interviews.
Well, I think let me now. I think let's move towards the third epoch because we're running a bit short on time. The 2008 was the 100th anniversary of the Davis campus, the opening of the Davis campus, and I happened to be on the committee that was putting together the program for the centennial celebrations. It was chaired by Bob Seeger, as you remember. And one of the things that came up in an early meeting I went to was, well, I understand there's all these tapes. How can we use these to do the centennial? So I went back and had a seance with Vern and said, what could we do? And well, Vern said, well, maybe we could produce 6 or 8 tapes that would capture the sort of highlights of these video records. I don't think either one of us had a notion that would involve us going and looking at 250 tapes. But anyway, that was the beginning of the Centennial Project. That's probably what slowed up the productivity of the overall project. But I think in the end, and the intent was that the campus had a pavilion at the State Fair in the fall of 2008, and they wanted some tapes to put on display. And we rushed hard, I think, Bert, to get a couple ready. But it was a project that went on over 2008, 2009, and didn't finish till early 2010. And in the end, we produced 27 tapes that are basically shortcuts from every college and school on campus. And do you have any idea how many people are on those tapes, Vern?
How many people?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
I would guess there's an average of 10 per tape, maybe.
That's not bad, yeah.
So
Well, I did the College of Engineering, and every chair and a couple of faculty, so yeah, maybe 10 or 12 on
Yeah.
Bill did the plant sciences, and I think there may have been 8 or 10 on those. So let's say somewhere between 8 and 10, so it's well over 200 people represented on those 27 tapes, and they were for a while on the website. I don't know where they are now.
They're on DCTV. I think. I mean, they're ingested by DCTV. Whether they've been actually put available for streaming, I don't know yet.
Okay, Vern, go ahead and comment on the. I say go ahead and comment on the Centennial Project. That was a hell of a lot of work you did to get that done.
Well, I thrive on work, so that was no problem.
Yes, I've been in the studio when he has spent almost 8 hours on a day doing editing work.
Yeah, things were not good at home. My wife was terminally ill at the time, so I was dealing with that too. So it was a difficult time, but I'm pleased that I was able to contribute and be a part of the project.
Well, I think it's a classic outcome of this project, and it's a historical record that'll be there forever.
I think it probably is.
In that sense, it's very, very important. My involvement with the project was first when I was serving on the board of the Emeriti Association, of always being bugged for more money for this project. The government asked for, no, we need a new camera, we need a new da-da-da-da-da. And they were regular visitors, Vern and John, with that. And then I became president of the association in 2008, and the project was having difficulty. And so we commissioned a review of the project, chaired by Graham Gall, as you'll remember, and basically changed at that point the focus from, rather than the committee being a decider of which names, to be recruiters. So we basically substituted a 12-man committee for Jim DeVay, basically, I think, to do recruiting. And it worked for a while and isn't working well now. So I think we're into the sort of tertiary stage of the project. The number of retirees is increasing, and we're picking up less and less of them, I think, as we go along. So any comments that any of us want to make about where do we go from here? Because it seems to me that's the major issue we face at this point. And that's not saying anything about the fact that we don't have an important legacy, but we need to keep moving forward. So, Bill, any comments?
Well, I would just say that, you know, the executive committee of the Emeriti Association and everybody that you talk to say this is a worthwhile project and should keep going. And the problem is getting the implementation of it into getting people to agree to interview, and then when they agree to actually schedule, because a lot of times there's a long delay before they actually will, even though they've said, oh, I'll do that, but they don't ever get on the calendar to do it. So we've been having more and more difficulty. I don't know how we're going to overcome that. We're going to have a meeting of the committee soon to discuss that issue particularly, but almost like the department chairs need to say it's a mandatory requirement for retirement to do this is about the only way I see that we can encourage some of these people to actually participate. But it's important that it go on because the history is still being written, and there's no reason to not keep on recording it.
Yeah, John, when Jim was starting to have more and more trouble, was it that people just didn't want to do it, or?
I think that's it, that he just would get turned down. He would call, and It just was very difficult to get someone to agree to do it. I don't have any good sense of why there was a general feeling that they didn't want to do it, or why.
Yeah, I think I would make two comments in this. One is I think that there is a sense among many of our colleagues that they don't have anything to offer. I remember one of my colleagues, because early on, John, when I joined the committee, John's committee, he said, we don't have any people from agricultural economics. Why aren't your colleagues up there? So I went out and beat the bush, and I got 4 or 5 in a row too. But one of them said to me, I have nothing to offer. And I said, you've been here for 40 years. You must have something to offer. And so I remember that because I interviewed him. And 59 minutes into the interview, he was just getting started in the 1980s. You know? And I said, it's over. No, I got lots more things to say. You know? So I think that's part of the problem, is that people don't think they have anything to offer. But once they're into it, they really get excited about it.
I don't know, Bill, are the interviews that you're doing now, are they still being shown on the local television?
Yes, they are. I mean, actually.
Yeah, we did that throughout my tenure, and we always gave the interviewee and the interviewer a copy of the video, so that the family could put them in their archives. Hopefully, we thought that might encourage others who realized this was going on to participate. So I don't know. I don't have any answers to your question.
It is important for families too. I mean, we get about 10 requests probably a year for additional copies for people who want to give it to their
that jogs my memory. The founding dean of the medical school here at Davis, John Tupper, was so impressed with his interview that he ordered 33 copies.
A large family, I guess.
A big family.
Just to, I think we need to wrap up here. I think Alan Jackman tells me that Davis Community TV now has in their system all of the interviews plus the centennial tapes, but they're not all upstreamed. It's not how they're not all available at this point, but they're all in the system, and we're still trying to get that to happen. Okay, so I think, yes, Bill?
Well, I was going to say, there's one thing that we haven't touched on, and that's, although we haven't been getting as many Emeriti faculty to participate, the staff part of the campus has gotten very interested in projects. Some of our volunteers are now staff people, not Emeriti, and they're scheduling interviews with more staff than we are with emeritus faculty.
Right, okay.
So there is another operation for staff?
Well, yeah, the staff, their association nominates some people who have distinguished careers on campus, and they seem to be able to get them to participate. So you know,
who does the interview? Who does it?
Well, just
same process.
Oh, okay.
So it's broadened. I think that's a good point. To include not only emeritus faculty, academic federation, but also staff who've had distinguished careers and contribute to the history of the campus.
And before I retired, we were also including extension people.
Yes. So it's broader now.
Yeah, I mean, done people like Bob Kerr and Bob Franks and
So let me try and just say thank you to all of you for spending the time with us today, and I hope that this will become an advertisement for the future of the project, and to have captured in one fell swoop the history that's here, I appreciate very much, and I'm only sorry that we didn't get this done before Jim DeVay passed away from last year, because he made an important contribution, and we've already recognized the contributions of Alan Stambusky, Everard de Hardcourt, and Harry Cole. So thank you all very much, and I appreciate you coming in and spending the time with us today.